Okay, so we are going to shift to a very different topic thing. So we are coming to the digital thing now, very different from what we have been discussing so far. So I'm assuming you have read the Rob Kitchen thing, and I think that you have found some resonance in terms of how you navigate the city with Google Maps, with weather apps, and all of that. And so let me start asking a very simple question. How many of you have used Google Map to navigate your ways when you came here, or check the weather app to familiarize yourself with Silcher to determine what kind of clothes you will carry? Is there anyone who have? All of you, all of you. Yeah. So that's a part of our everyday affair now. I mean, it's not an exception, or it doesn't require reiterating. So this is all a part of our daily affair. So these are very small pieces of what Kitchen calls real-time city. Like the weather app gives you like real-time information of the city. Google app gives you real-time information of the traffic. So a city that is being constantly monitored, sensed, recorded, and adjusted through like a diverse streams of data. So these are all data points, and we are fed through these data points that allow us to determine the quality of the city and how we are going to navigate through it. So that's like one thing. So I also wanted to share like a brief background of this essay. If you have noted, it came out in which year? Does anyone recall? 2014. It's a fairly, I would say, old, 10 years old essay. And do you need notice any significant change that has happened since your understanding of real life data or navigation of the city, like 10 years back, what he's writing about compared to how you navigate it now? So,
yeah. I believe that digital maps like Google Maps, they have become more ubiquitous. Like they have been more integrated, more commonly used now by us as a part of daily life. Earlier we knew about them as some concepts, but they were like not that much frequently used because they didn't have the necessary software or the hardware or the like let's say digital connectivity to let's say commonly use them. But now like they are a part and parcel of our lives. That is like what I can understand from those.
So it's not just Google Maps. So I'm like trying to push your argument a little bit further. What I understand you mean is the ubiquity of internet. So that is a significant change since last 10 years, especially cheap data. That is another change. Data has become super cheap. India is one of, forget about the speed of the data, but if you just look at the cost, India is one of the cheapest data providing places. So I think these two, in my opinion, like these two things have changed. So I flagged that the 2014 thing here as a flag post to understand like the kind of discussions that we are going to have in a moment. So in my opinion, this is one of the very influential early generation internet scholarship. I mean, again, you do not have to agree with me, that goes without saying, but this is my understanding of the essay. So this comes in, if it comes in 2014, this is one of very early generation internet scholarship. And the principal question it asks, and I list, these are what happens when we start governing cities through continuous automated data flows. And I think a question that we just now discussed, like whose view that we read infrastructures from, who wins, who loses, who are represented, who are not, and what kinds of knowledge about cities get reduced, erased in the process. So, I mean, these are very innovative questions to ask in 2014, back in 2014. I mean, this might be fairly obvious to us ask now at this point, but to be able to ask this in 2014 is a profoundly novel task. So by the end of this session, I want you to reflect on 3 questions, and I use this as flag posts, so you keep this in the back of your mind, so that when we finish, or maybe in the discussion session when we come back, let's try to hook our discussions around these points. So So what does Kitchen means by real-time city? Is it like is it a temporal question he is asking? Like what exactly does real-time stand for? How big data, smart urbanism reshape our perception of cities, and of course in terms of how they are managed, governed, imagined, and so on and so forth, and why Kitchen insists that these systems are always partial, political, deeply entangled with power. So these are also questions that we have so far discussed, not necessarily in terms of digital, but these questions have been like central nodes of our discussion so far. So the first question, the real time or the temporality argument here, so I'll begin with that. So he's referring to an urban condition where vast amount of data are captured and produced. So this is one thing. So in my understanding, real time is not necessarily a temporal question. It has also got to do with like the big data kind of thing. Also got to do with the sheer amount or the sheer volume of data that we are dealing with here as certain events unfold. So by events I mean it could be like a traffic in a city, like maybe a medical database, weather app, over one of you talked about like using heat map, like Google's heat map. So that those are like real-time data gathered over a considerable period of time. So it's a vast amount of data, in other words, like and these are data gathered through sensors, smartphones, cameras, GPS. Like even when you take a selfie and geotag it, you are unwittingly producing real-time data. Of course, not very consciously, but these are real-time data that we feed into, and then processed almost instantaneously to make decisions about certain cities. Like if you see a Google map now, there are geotagged images and like all those kind of things. Like then we make decisions about the city in as much as corporations make decisions about cities. So I'll come to this book in a moment. It's a very interesting book which in connection to the essay that we are discussing, if you're interested in this kind of questions, you might like this book. So the question here is about efficiency, and what this book does, and the reason that I bring this book up in connection with Kitchen's essay, is the fact that it plays on the word failure. So they're saying like what happens when you try to run a city like Amazon, and like there's a bunch of very short provocative essays in this book, like very very short really, and like the essays they take about like different corporations. I think Facebook, IKEA, Amazon, and a bunch of others like this, and they say like what happens when you try to govern a city like IKEA, for example. So what ideological imperatives translate into when you try to imagine a city like Amazon, Facebook, IKEA. So what does it ring a bell? Like what does Amazon in terms of value, imagination, ideology, what does Amazon stand for? What does IKEA stand for? Sorry? Multi? All three. What would you say is the characteristic of Amazon? Like if you were to distinguish between, let's say, Facebook, Amazon, and
consumerism market.
But that's true of IKEA as well. What is specific about Amazon? That's the question.
Amazon is online, but IKEA is offline.
But that's not a characteristic.
Multiple products at the same time. IKEA is furniture specific or like homeware specific. Mostly I see.
Okay, and what is its connection with city making then? Understood. Well, your point is well taken.
The connection could be that Amazon would run a city more in tune with multiple things at the same time, and wherein there would be an over-determining ideology in terms of by IKEA.
Okay, let me give you a clue. Like, what has then this got to do with imaginations of spaces or spatiality?
The networks, how the spatiality would be organized would be different. For
of course.
Amazon, for Amazon, it would be I would say mostly diffused, whereas for IKEA it would be concentrated towards one particular end, maybe.
Okay, yes. Sure.
When agent deliver their products, the map they use to deliver their products or reach out to their consumers.
So they actually, in the book, they talk about Amazon warehouse. So they use that as a spatial model. So what does an Amazon warehouse do? So it auto delivers your product. I mean, think of the kind of warehouse, of course, we are not allowed inside an Amazon warehouse, but if you have a kind of imagination how it works, there are robotic elements that picks up your product, packages it, delivers it, auto handles it, and so on and so forth. It's based on efficiency. It's a model based on efficiency. It's it's a need-based economy. So that's the spatial imagination. And IKEA the essay that deals with the IKEA thing, they talk about the IKEA thing is more modular. Like each furniture is assembled, could be assembled or disassembled in a modular way. So the modularity is IKEA's characteristic. So all things put together, the point that this book is trying to make, which is in connection to the kitchen essay, is the fact of modularity, number one, and efficiency, how you deliver things based on needs, how well you predict somebody's need and deliver what is needed. So that's what this book discusses, and the question, as I said here, is efficiency, optimization, responsiveness. And imagine here in this context, now forget about the book now, come to the kitchen thing now. So imagine traffic lights that adjust automatically to congestion. I mean, these are realities. I mean, many Indian smart cities now have traffic lights that adjust themselves to real-time traffic. So they gather sensor data from traffic, and then they readjust the traffic lights. Energy grids, for example, they balance electric load dynamically depending on the need, or police who are deployed according to. I mean, this is real-time thing, especially in the US. Like they monitor Facebook content and deploy police preemptively depending on where they predict crime. Like these are very much real-life things. These are not sci-fi elements. So Kitchen situates this within a broader shift to what he calls smart urbanism. Or 2014, this term was not very familiar, but I would now, in today's parlance, in internet scholarship nowadays, they call platform urbanism. This is a very much a term in vogue. So Kitchen refers to this as smart urbanism, and this idea that cities can be made better, safer, more resilient, and more sustainable through collection of more data. So the idea is, if you collect more data, you can govern it better. So that's the argument. More data you have, the better would you be able to govern it. So that's the premise. Through collection and analysis of more data. So big data, as he defines it, isn't just a lot of data. So it's not just about temporality. So I began with that thing. So it's real-time data is not about temporality only, in as much it's not just about a lot of data. Like if you collect, it's not about a threshold that you move beyond that it becomes big data. So that's not the question. So it's a certain character of data, it's a certain kind of data, and how you analyze or how you use it. Of course, depending on its volume. So these are the 3 V's that Kitchen discusses. If anyone remembers what are the 3 V's? Big data is big data because of and variety. Okay, versatility works. Okay, it's a synonym, but yes, volume, velocity, variety. So massive data sets generated quickly in multiple forms, multiple formats, often analyzed through algorithms rather than we read data traditionally. So that's the characteristic of big data. This is Kitchen's opinion. So in real-time, city data doesn't describe the urban environment. It kind of determines how you think about the city in cases of corporation, how they think cities could be governable, and so on and so forth. The city thus becomes a kind of living laboratory. So you use that as like a tool for an experiment. You gather data, and then it's a continuous loop. So you take data from the city and you feed into how you imagine or how you seek to govern it. So this, Kitchen argues, represents a major epistemological shift. So I'll come to that in a moment. So what any idea that what is happening here? What happens when you try to govern a city like this?
A
Yes.
small glitch can overturn the system and everything comes to a standstill.
But that's true of anything, like a small glitch in your car, if the battery goes off, that can ruin your entire day. That's not, I wouldn't probably be convinced that that is what you are saying is specifically true to platform urbanism. Yes, I saw a hand, yeah.
The purpose or the intention that is promoted behind use of data infrastructure is objectivity, that data brings objectivity. However, too much of data would then exclude all the uniqueness out of it, and therefore
But what do you mean by
basically
uniqueness?
abstract everyone. So the intention probably could be to centralize through the use of data, that can control the city.
Okay, so can anyone take a cue from what she said and drive the centralized point home a little bit? What exactly does she mean when she says
I
centralization?
think like it's sort of like a similar thought process to her, that there is this, let's say, moving or intention among the, let's say, government or the controlling entity, that they want to predict the most rational and the most objective outcomes by collating, by organizing, analyzing the data they can gather from these sources in order to, let's say, impose it on the regulatory mechanisms.
Okay, so that's fairly the argument that I said. The more data you have, better would you be able to govern it. So that's the line of argument, right?
Yes, like governance is one part, but like more how can you predict, like what things you can prevent or what things you can plan for the future. It is based on the data that you can gather from the present. It's like sort of predicting the future sort of.
But that's what all models do. Like a scientific model would also do that.
Yes, but let's say it's like the traditional governance models, they are mostly rooted in the present times. But like by organizing.
Agreed, but I'm saying what is the problem in this? What's wrong in this? Like the law of thermodynamics, let's say, it's a predictive law. So if you apply X, Y will happen. So all models are generally speaking, all models are predictive. So you're correct, but you are not driving the point home. What's wrong in it? So we wouldn't otherwise call the law of thermodynamics is problematic because it's predictive. So predictability cannot be the quintessential reason why you find a problem with this model. That cannot be the reason.
Big brother thing is always
Okay.
surveillance and encroachment over the privacy.
Okay. So I'll try to come to that in a moment. But I think I'll give you more cues here. Sorry. Yes.
So data is basically a mirror as well as the maker of society. So what data government is using, what data we are feeding, will in terms it will also affect us. It will affect the government and the whole governance structure, and it also creates an echo chamber, who to exclude, who to include. So that is how data governs more or less. That is why it is also being called the big oil and that kind of things.
So in other words, you are saying data is not neutral. So there could be ownership of data. I think this is the point we are trying to, like, people own data. If I take a picture and save it on my selfie, it's clearly my data. But the moment I geotag it and Facebook on Instagram, I'm not so sure whether the data, in terms of proprietorship, it belongs exclusively to me or not. It's not a easy question to answer. So this is the point that we are trying to come to. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention before I plunge more into the kitchen essay is the fact that people who, I don't know if any one of you are interested in internet studies as like a broader field of discipline, but many of you probably would be familiar with the fact that the early generation of internet studies scholar associated, I'm not getting into the names thing, so maybe people might not be exclusively interested in internet studies, but people ascribed a set of like democratic values to internet. Like, for example, the whole Wikipedia model, if you think, the whole imagination or aspiration that anyone can post anything, anyone can edit anything. So the whole democratic values that people ascribe to internet. So that's the early generation of internet studies scholarship, I would say, at around that time, 2010-ish. Then people started becoming critical about that, and if you also have to be aware of the fact that this was during the early generation of internet studies. Like people, like we are increasingly also steeped in spatial metaphors. Like if you look into the metaphors that we use with reference to the internet, like navigation, website, like these are all spatial metaphors. So there's a peculiar problem when you imagine internet, which is not a real thing as such in terms of spatial metaphors. That's the other problem I'm trying to come to. One is the data proprietorship, how you use data, who owns data. So that's a proprietorship kind of question. The other question is the spatial imagination. What happens? I think this is also very difficult to answer question. I don't want a answer right away, but I think these are questions that we need to be seriously thinking about. What happens when you think about the internet as a space? I mean, it's not literally a space. So Christian argues that I mean, this represents a major epistemological shift in terms of the two qualities that we just discussed. It's a new way of knowing, governing the city, grounded in continuous data flows rather than surveys, long-term planning, and so on and so forth, the traditional way. So this is the two epistemic kind of shifts that we are discussing here. So let us now try to break this down more concretely. So he describes this as a data ecosystem, like sensors, devices, they collect information about everything from air quality, traffic speed, congestion, energy consumption, crime, preemptive crime, so on and so forth. And this data then flows into centralized databases or control rooms, which I just now referred to as CTS laboratories. So you use this kind of control imagination of control rooms we get to see, especially in the crime thriller web series. If you see, like people moving around with a surveillance van and looking into a control room trying to predict. A very typical representation of crime thriller movies. So these systems promise real-time feedback, of course. It's a given, and if traffic builds up, signals can change. If energy grid spikes, systems can redistribute the load, and so on and so forth. So I'm not getting into that kind of a detail, but if social media spikes of a certain kind of posts spikes, you need where to deploy the police and so on. So this architecture, so this is a complete architecture in its own right, like sensors, networks, algorithms, data points, dashboards, and so on and so forth. And this is what enables smart urbanism or platform urbanism to function or claim that it can make cities more responsive or more resilient. So that's the claim of democracy, resilience, transparency, however you may want to put it. So I mean, if you look at the early smart city literature, so that was the whole argument. So we'll make things more transparent. Digital India campaign, for example, if you have read the manifestos, for example, so they all talk about transparency. So there are a lot of corruptions here and around. So if you have like everything digital, money pumped into your account digitally, that will take care of the corruption. It will be, everything will be super transparent. So these are the catchwords. They kind of characterize anything, any digital initiative is underpinned by this kind of a logic. So I'm not talking about whether this is good, bad, whether this is acceptable or not, but that's a fact. But as the essay emphasizes, these aren't neutral tools. They are built by certain people, and we discussed corporations right in the previous lecture. People who invest where and what kind of rationale governs or drives when you invest in certain things over others, certain places over others. So if you're building a smart city, for example, if you're restructuring a smart city, for example, like you have to make sense of like who is investing and what kind of infrastructures are invested in. So I already discussed in this context, like this book is very helpful, and if you are interested in this kind of discussion, I insist that you go back and you, as I said, like these are not academic essays to begin with. These are, that's where the word fable comes from. These are very provocative and imaginative essays. They talk, in a very fableish form, they do like a thought experiment. Imagine what if IKEA is governing your city? What if Amazon is governing your city? So everything you do, moving, eating, commuting, they produce data. This data then feeds into algorithm that kind of predict what will you need next, and then IKEA will modularize it. Amazon will, what is now fairly very commonly, buy something that you people who have bought also bought this. So that's what the Amazon catchphrase. So it sounds very familiar, like we are all into this ecosystem. But here's the twist here. In an Amazon city, this is a term that this book uses, Amazon city, efficiency becomes the highest moral value, not let's say democracy, let's say participatory governance. So these are secondary. So efficiency, if I were, so they take these multiple examples, IKEA, Facebook, and so for the sake of brevity, we don't get into all those questions. But if we were to consider Amazon governing a city, the point that I'm trying to make in connection to both these readings and this one, efficiency becomes a virtue or the highest standards of your moral virtues. It's not, as I said, participatory governance or other possibilities that you might, as an individual, you might be valuing. So this is exactly what Kitchen warns us, and that's back in 2014. So this is, I'm trying to highlight the 2014 thing here. That was way premature, if we may put it that way, that data-driven systems govern not only space, but they govern our lives and possibilities and the way that we think about cities. So, and crucially, these systems operate through, as we have already discussed, some of you pointed this out, these are like very seemingly, apparently, automated decision making, like the way Amazon predicts what you need next is an automated decision making. But I call this seemingly because there's also like a coding involved here, and there are people who are trained to make those codes work. So the algorithms then process data faster than humans can interpret it. I mean, if you had to interpret what I need next, it would of course take more time than what algorithm does, and as a result government starts to shift from deliberation or dispersal to computation. In this case, in an Amazon city, for example. So this is the epistemological shift that Kitchen is talking about, like when the question of deliberation or dispersal is superridden by questions of efficiency and computation, from public reasoning to algorithmic calibration. So on that note, I wanted to show this small
and I want to talk about what a word may be more relevant to your interests right now than people dying in Africa. And I want to talk about what a web based on that idea of relevance might look like. So when I was growing up in a really rural area in Maine, the internet meant something very different to me. It meant a connection to the world. It meant something that would connect us all together. And I was sure that it was going to be great for democracy and for our society. But there's this kind of shift in how information is flowing online. And it's invisible. And if we don't pay attention to it, it could be a real problem. So I first noticed this in a place I spend a lot of time, my Facebook page. I'm progressive politically, big surprise, but I've always gone out of my way to meet conservatives. I like hearing what they're thinking about. I like seeing what they link to. I like learning a thing or two. And so I was kind of surprised when I noticed one day that the conservatives had disappeared from my Facebook feed. And what it turned out was going on was that Facebook was looking at which links I clicked on. And it was noticing that actually I was clicking more on my liberal friends' links than on my conservative friends' links. And without consulting me about it, it had edited them out.
Friday is company karaoke, 90s pop theme. I'm something of a karaoke connoisseur.
They disappeared. So Facebook isn't the only place that's doing this kind of invisible algorithmic editing of the web. Google's doing it too. if I search for something and you search for something, even right now at the very same time, we may get very different search results. Even if you're logged out, one engineer told me, there are 57 signals that Google looks at. Everything from what kind of computer you're on, to what kind of browser you're using, to where you're located, that it uses to personally tailor your query results. Think about it for a second. There is no standard Google anymore. And the funny thing about this is that it's hard to see. You can't see how different your search results are from anyone else's. But a couple of weeks ago, I asked a bunch of friends to Google Egypt and to send me screenshots of what they got. So here's my friend Scott's screenshot, and here's my friend Daniel's screenshot. When you put them side by side, you don't even have to read the links to see how different these two pages are. But when you do read the links, it's really quite remarkable. Daniel didn't get anything about the protests in Egypt at all in his first page of Google results. Scott's results were full of them. And this was the big story of the day at that time. That's how different these results are becoming. So it's not just Google and Facebook either. This is something that's sweeping the web. There are a whole host of companies that are doing.
So I think we'll stop here. The point here being then Amazon shows you what Amazon thinks you need, not necessarily what you need. So that's the point. So he's making an argument here. If you listen to the list of the lecture, he talks about traditional editing versus web journalism. So that's where the lecture steers into up to this point. And he talks about the news that we are fed is what Google thinks we should know, not necessarily things that we should know. So he makes this subtle distinction here. So analogously, the point about smart urbanism or platform urbanism in this case is we are fed with information that Google or other corporations that are into city making in this context, they think that we should know or that should govern our imagination of the city rather than what we actually need. So now we reach the heart of Kitchen's argument here and his critique of what he calls the data-driven form of urbanism or algorithmic vision of the city. So this is the heart of the essay. So he argues that real-time city is actually not a real-time city. So that is his argument. It's very contradictory in that sense. Data collection is always partial and selective, and these are the points that we are discussing. We have been discussing for a long time now, and they kind of determine the quality of real-time city. Sensors fail, devices lag, algorithms simplify things, erase certain people, there are glitches, there are ads popping up like the ones that we just now saw. So not all areas are equally monitored. That's the nature of data. And we were discussing the other day, in terms of Google Maps, a student of mine who just submitted, submitted her thesis a couple of years back. She worked in one of her chapters, how Google Maps differ from Uber Maps, for example, although we know that Uber Maps actually use Google Maps. So she was looking at the concentration of data points in Uber Maps, and it was very surprising. So the urban-rural distinction, or the periphery-core distinction, is very blurred in the case of Uber Maps. If you have, again, those who are familiar with the Kolkata map, a map near a shopping arcade in peripheral Kolkata would probably have more data in many places in North Calcutta, for example, where you have alleyways. So North Calcutta is the city where, if you think from the colonial times, where the city began with, so that's the heart of the city. So it might so happen, she had practical demonstrations, screenshots to share. So that was her finding, that you might have more detailed information about a shopping mall in Rajarhat than an urban alley in the northern part of Calcutta, for example. So that's determined based on pickups and drop-offs, where you have more clustering of data, who is taking Uber rides where, and what kind of, again, if you think in terms of mobilities and routes, who is going where. So more people are likely to take Uber rides to the shopping mall in an urban periphery than, let's say, an urban alleyway in North Kolkata. So that's the whole logic. So Kitchen identifies like three problems here with this approach, with platform urbanism, so to say. First, the epistemic limits. Big data may be fast, but it not necessarily true. Like I use true, of course, with all the caveat included here, like true not necessarily in terms of veracity, but in terms of like equal or again like the value of democracy associated with internet. So it might not be necessarily democratic, like true in that sense. So it captures what is measurable. So it only captures what is measurable, not what is meaningful, not what you need. So Amazon captures what it can predict through your purchasing behavior, not exactly what you need. So social life, cultural context, political relationships, these do not necessarily fit into this kind of a sensor model. Readings or geospatial predictions, in other words, cities become known through a narrow lens of quantification, which is fairly obvious. We see flows and signals, but we do not see how cities are lived. And in this context, I invite that you reflect on the Desarto reading and the reading that we discussed yesterday. So as opposed to that kind of an approach to city, what does this approach bring in terms of novelty? So the second problem is political or ethical concerns. This is all, again, should be obvious, fairly obvious now. The real-time city is also a surveillance city, as some of you have already pointed. Like every phone ringing, every transaction, every mobility routes that you are taking, these are all governed. The moment you, as I said, geotag an image, you do not know where, you do not have any control over the afterlife of the image, how the image is being shared, where it goes, and even if like who reshares it, who reposts it, you don't have any control over the afterlife. So data once collected for efficiency can easily be used for other purposes. They could be repurposed for control, governance, surveillance, and think of the predictive police deployment, for example, that we just now discussed. So I think in this context we need to ask who owns the data. It's the proprietorship line of argument that we again discussed at the beginning. Who decides like how data is used, how the data would be governed, like CCTV data, for example. There are a lot of, especially in legal scholarship, there's a lot of discussion on how, like who owns the CCTV data. Like, I mean, most CCTV, in urban context, I'm talking about urban context here, like they are used for transparency and, to prevent crime. So that's the typical argument given. And for community purposes, but the community doesn't own the data. There's like either a person, either a housing, and then there's no clarity on how the data is being used. So I think these are the questions that we need to think about in relation to the essay, like who owns the data, who decides how it is used, and like are citizens being governed with data or by data. I think this is also one important question here. And I think Kitchen is being skeptical about the claim that more data equals more democracy, which is something that we already started like problematizing this whole assumption. And often it consolidates power in corporations that owns the platform. So if you are sharing a data on Instagram, so we all give permissions without even reading the permission pages that pop up, and at that point we don't have any clarity on who owns which data. And this the third problem that Kitchen is discussing is the socio-technical or economic problem. And this is particularly true in the case of the Northeast. So I think I'll refer to smart urbanism here, and people who are familiar with smart urbanism projects. Why do you think smart urbanism has taken off in certain cities but not some other cities? Do you have any idea? If you look at larger Indian map, I think Bangalore, Karnataka, of course you brought it up yesterday, is known as a tech-savvy city, as opposed to where in India, in terms of patterns, do you think smart city as a whole, collectively, has not taken off at all?
Northeast Central India.
Yes, correct. Why would that be the case?
Absence of multinational companies.
Agreed. Obvious. But why?
Infrastructure and digital divide.
Are you guessing or is?
I am saying infrastructure and digital divide.
Are you guessing or have you consulted the literature? That's my point. Like, have you gotten it from somewhere or? Okay. Yes. Why do you think is the case here? Yes. Any other reason? Any other reason that you would think?
The internet cables that all this 200 was.
That's the infrastructure question. That is contained in what he said. I mean, it's fairly obvious. I mean, that's true. But I'm trying to push you to think. Can you think about something more nuanced?
Maybe a comparative analysis of capital investment, capital generation in central India, eastern India, northeast is less than in western and southern India. The scope of capital investment, scope of capital generation is comparatively less.
Are you guessing or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Could be. I don't know. Like, but I have a different answer.
Actually, like I'm not exactly answering your question, but like if I remember correctly, that when the Indian government started its smart city scheme, it first of all shortlisted and selected like certain cities which were to be first made smart, and then they created new lists and included more cities. So like the thrust was to develop first certain cities first.
First set of yes.
Yes, and then to like progressively go towards other tier 2 and tier 3 cities.
So you mean there are early adapters who went ahead, and there were people or places that lagged?
Yes, it was a policy measure, like in my opinion.
Okay, could be. I don't know. Like, but there's also another reason I think, which is in my understanding very counterintuitive. The first thing people noted was funds were being underspent here, and then they started looking at why are funds being underspent in the Northeast. The answer was there was no coordination between the local organization entities who were entrusted with actually like doing the hands-on work, restructuring the urban plans, and which in the smart city is like who were making the smart city literally. Who were making the smart city? Sorry? No. How did you make make your smart city? How did you make it?
Consume the data, no? So that is why if at some place people are consuming more data.
Okay. I mean that's a very different understanding of making. But I'm saying who is hands-on making it, literally making it.
Then that's the government.
Local companies, private companies.
Correct. That's a private company. Those are parastatal organizations. So those were relegated to corporations. And how were they nominated, elected, voted? How?
They were not.
That's the problem. That's the problem. And in the Northeast, ethnicity became a very interesting thing here because they couldn't trust each other. So there was no coordination between the central governmental entities, the local governmental entities, and what they were referred to as the SVPs, like the special private vehicles, I think, no? SVP, special private vehicles, which is actually the corporations and private entities who were interested with doing the hands-on work. So there was no coordination between the two, and the three entities, they didn't trust each other. So like the money went from one hand to another, but it was stuck and it was not being spent. This is a very typical, like Central India might have another problem, but the problem with Northeast India is this, which is very counterintuitive. So it's not about infrastructures, not so much about, I mean that might be one cause, but the chief determinant is the fact that there was no coordination between these three entities, and the whole point the local entities raised is like these are people who have no idea about, I mean if you remember, like many of you were hesitant tearing the $1 bill because of the value that you ascribe to it, and many people who were interviewed, like this essay that I'm referring to, they talk about like people complain that the people who are actually entrusted with executing the smart city, they have no ideas what kind of values we put to a, let's say, a plaque or a monument or a statue. Like They just want to reconstruct the city without knowing the history of the city. So, smart urbanism leads to privatized governance, as this case illustrates. Cities are kind of there. This is kind of outsourced at its core function from traffic management, data analytics to these kind of private firms, private entities, and they create a lock-in period. So that is also very important. And this has no correlation whatsoever with elected forms of governance or democracy. So you give a contract to a party totally arbitrarily. So TCS might be, executing the smart city plan in Nagaland, Kohima, and they are locked in for a certain period of time. Let's say X years. So, and that's a lock-in period. So you cannot back them out, no matter what they do. So there's an element of proprietorship in this, which is not often very opaque, and so on and so forth. So this is so I'm using this case as an illustration to show what Kitchen says is like the economic or socio-technical problem. Once a parastatal organization is in, it's in for X number of years. So I think we should wind up. We have 12:45, right? It's not 12:30. 12:45, right? Yes. Okay. So let's pause here and make these. I'll try to make this more concrete here. Take a few minutes and think of a smart city system that you personally use. Or it could be transportation. It could be like your certain mobile apps, maybe the health apps of the kind that we discussed. It could be like literally anything. Like it could be even like your food delivery apps like Uber Eats. And could you now ask yourself what's one benefit and what kind of risk does it pose? Like if you like Uber Eats, for example, or the Swiggy app, for example. So what does it happen? Like, how does it benefit, or what kind of risks does it pose in terms of the three things that we just now discussed? So these are also data points, right? The moment I think Sunanda is not here, she was discussing the technical glitches about ordering food in a small town here that is adapting to, let's say, the Zomato app. So what happens when you try to do it?
One thing is privacy concerns. Like I don't know about Swiggy, but over Zomato there is now they have introduced a section where they share what your friends are eating, and so that is a privacy concern. Like so there was one person posted it over Reddit. He is a vegetarian according to his family, but he do eat non. Now on his father's Zomato,
Exposed.
he was exposed. He does eat non-veg, so he covered it. My friend ordered it and whatever. But yeah, it is a privacy issue.
Okay. But can you push this argument in terms of like city making or in terms of speciality? I mean, privacy issue is one thing, digital divide is one thing. I mean, these are fairly well discussed arguments. I'm trying to now like do a more like a zoomed out view, and can we think of like more like an internet studies kind of scholarship? What do you think is happening here in terms of city making?
Where we are, what we consume does affect the market around us. I mean, it showcases in the data sets. So that is how the markets establishes there. If at some locality people are more prone to buy branded products, the more such stores will open there. So that does affect.
Anyone wants to add to that?
Might be related to the whole problem of gig economy.
Just a political economy problem. Yes. Not necessarily a city making problem.
Sometimes these apps like dictate what we should have. Like in a food ordering app, like let's say if biryani is getting more ordered, then in like the app is going to push that food. And
That is what he said. So if you have like consumer footprint in a certain place, more shops are likely to be set up there. So that's the same argument. And then like if you drive this home, what is the logical extreme to this? What happens? Like, why is this bad or good? What's the problem with this?
Class difference would be very stark.
But that is something that we already have. You are saying that it will amplify it. That's the argument. Okay, fine. And what else?
It will sort of, I'm guessing it will sort of create an echo chamber. Like the people who are using the app, only their footprints will be validated in their surroundings.
Correct. And it will replicate the existing structural bias. That's the main argument. So one might say, like, we have shops where people go to shop. That is also, like, that has got nothing to do with digital, right? So people, like, where are malls set up? Like, of course people do market research. They don't randomly set up a shopping mall where, let's say, the real estate is cheap. I mean, that's not the case. So they do market research. They figure out where people would likely to go to. So I mean, this is a pre-digital kind of argument. There's nothing new to this. The point I think we need to draw on Kitchen's essay is the fact that what the digital does is, contrary to what many early generation internet studies scholar ascribe to internet, namely the democracy kind of values, it's contrary to that. It's like replication or amplification of the structural biases that are existent. Like, and it then explains why, for example, people with Afro-American thumbnail pictures on their Uber apps likely to have their rides 7 times more likely their rides to be cancelled than other counterparts. Like 4 times more likely they will be strip searched if you are a black person in a UK airport, for example. So these are existing biases, that those are amplified when you have a certain kind of data clustering around this. I think this is the problem which is at the heart of what Kitchen is discussing, and these tensions between optimizations and oversight, between knowledge, power, and the question of course, the question of agency, which I am trying to draw your attention to. So the point is not about whether data is good or bad. So we are not making a virtue kind of argument. Like, I mean, that's a typical, again, like very superfluous digital divide kind of argument. Like people say, well, like poor people don't have access to this, so this is bad. So I'm not trying to make that kind of an argument, and that kind of scholarship is pretty well discussed. We have a lot of literature, especially in the Indian context, that deal with the question of digital divide, especially in political economy terms. Like people, like the poor rich divide, access to technology, not access to technology, that kind of a divide. But I'm trying to draw your attention to a more nuanced understanding of the internet here, not necessarily in terms of the political economy argument, but how data is governed and the question of agency here, and then its ramifications with respect to knowledge and power. I think I'll stop here. The room is again booked from 1, so I think I'll take 2 questions, but we'll have more time in the evening.